Hi, I'm CSK, and I read a textbook once. I highly suggest you watch the first two parts of this video series, part 1 and part 2, before you watch this video, because this probably won't make a lot of sense if you don't. So having said that, this is the third part of my series on evolutionary psychology, and it's kind of like the end of an era. It's like they finally made a sequel to Hangover 2. For this video, I would like to once again return to the evolutionary struggles proposed by Buss. Last time I focused on sex, and this time I would like to focus on the equally interesting, not really, family struggles and struggles for existence. The struggle for existence can be broken down into three parts: struggles against the conditions of life, struggles against other species, and struggles against our own species. Basically, to exist, we have to deal with how we live, how we deal with other species, and how we deal with our own species. In regards to dealing with the conditions of life, we have spatial abilities. Rather surprisingly, people don't like getting lost. An article by Silverman outlines the sex differences of spatial abilities. Its results show that males are often better at mental rotation tasks, while females are often better at object location memory. It has been hypothesized that this difference comes from hunter and gatherer times. The hunters, generally men, would need mental rotation to be able to follow the prey through novel environments and figure out the quickest way home from that point. Gatherers, on the other hand, primarily women, would need object location memory to remember where plots of edible plants were from year to year. It was basically like Extreme Farmville, but if you failed, you died. In an example that will explain how popular I was in high school, World of Warcraft features leatherworkers. These leatherworkers can go into Eversong Woods, track a lynx, kill it, skin it, and get some leatherworking materials. To return to Silvermoon City to use these skinned materials, it wouldn't make any sense to go any other way but directly. In this way, those leatherworkers are using mental rotation and mental orientation. Gatherers, or those employed in herbalism, just had to remember where the best plants spawned. This difference created different mental abilities in each sex, dating back to our ancestral environment. Another adaptation to our struggle against the conditions of life is specific habitat preferences. Humans should like locations that are beneficial to our survival. In a 2010 article by Falk, he discussed the savanna hypothesis. This idea argues that savannas were the perfect locations for early life because they were warm and you could see far distances in case of approaching predators. Plus, The Lion King was filmed there. But moving on from the conditions of life, we also have adaptations that help us deal with other species. To start, we have to think very small: bacteria. In part 1, I talked about depression's possible role in defense against infection. But in an article by Chapman, he talked about another way of avoiding infection: disgust. Disgust is an emotion shared by all humans because of its protective capabilities. Things such as feces and spilled meat disgust us because they're possible carriers of dangerous bacteria. The most common response to disgust is expulsive, sticking out your tongue and spitting, maybe vomiting. This would hopefully get any dangerous bacteria or viruses out of your system. Another adaptation against other species is the anti-predator adaptations. One of these adaptations is alarm calls, which was studied in an article by Campbell. These primates living in the forest made alarm calls most often when they were approached by familiar threats such as gaboon vipers. This alarm call would either make all the primates make a coalitional defense or just run away. On a grander scale, there's certain fears that we have that are meant to make us avoid certain species. In many studies, it has been shown that evolutionarily relevant fears such as snakes, spiders, and angry faces are easier to detect. However, Falk showed in his article that humans attend to guns just as quickly as snakes. But Professor Jones argued this point, saying never trust snakes. So we've talked about the conditions of life and we've talked about other species. But what about our own species? In our own species, we have learned adaptation to warfare, and we have learned adaptation to anti-homicide, which seems counterintuitive. Pittman suggested that warfare evolved to gain access to females. A group that was splitting into two, probably due to overpopulation, would fight over the access to the female's reproductive rights. We would also fight against our own species for access to resources that would make our offspring more valuable, such as food. In more recent times, this adaptation has been co-opted by politics and religion, but we still fight as if we're close relatives, beside our brothers. In a 1987 article by Johnson, he argued that terms such as motherland, fatherland, and brother were used to evoke a sense of kinship. This kinship would make the other person act more altruistically towards you, because people are more likely to help their relatives, their own genes, than other random people. These terms are used in war just as they're used in fraternities and sororities to elicit a connection. And another adaptation against our species is the anti-homicide defense. Basically, don't get killed. In a 2011 article by Duntley, he reported that death inflicts costs on the individual. From the researchers who brought you Water is Wet. Not a real study, but if it was, it would definitely be this guy. The costs of death include loss of reproduction, damage to existing children, damage to extended kin group, and an increase in their rivals' fitness. So now that we know the negatives of dying, what are ways to avoid dying? Duntley outlined in his article the adaptations against homicide that we have, including don't become a victim, flee, defend yourself during an attack, inflict costs on the attacker in some way, physically, socially, economically, legally, or emotionally. And there's a note here from Duntley saying that if you want to inflict costs on the rival, you can say, you punch like a girl. Yeah, that's useful. So the second part of our struggles against our own species involve the family. This can further be broken down into parent-offspring conflict and sibling rivalry. In Godfrey's 1995 article, he discussed Trivers and Hamilton's theory that all family conflict is based off resources. Parents and offspring conflict because the offspring want all the parents' resources and the parents want some of their resources too. Siblings have conflicts because they want more resources from their parents than their siblings get. You are 100% you and your sibling is only 50% you, so you deserve twice as more than your sibling because you're all you and they are only half you, genetically. This is why there's very little conflict in the Empire, because all Stormtroopers are clones and they're all 100% related to each other. The dark side is actually quite a happy family if you ignore the murdering and stuff. And so I think that's an appropriate way to conclude a 3-part series on evolutionary psychology. Evolutionary psychology can be very conceptual and very hypothetically driven, but at least it gets people thinking. Like and subscribe if you want, or don't, or leave a comment. Or don't, and thanks for watching.